Welcome back to The Rebel's Edge. Wouldn't you love to have a job where you could misstate the jobs created by 818,000 jobs and still keep your job? Well, we'll be talking about that and a whole bunch more on The Rebel's Edge. Bang!
All right. I tell you what, you already caught me on that cold open, bro.
That's what's
it's only 800,000 between friends, John. I mean, what the
hell? Yeah, Mark, you got work to do to catch back up because Mark used to be the king of the cold open. I think I got the title back, Pete.
You got it back, baby. It's back.
Back, baby. Welcome, folks, to The Rebel's Edge. We're going to break down for you macro minute, fantastic futures, as well as a bunch of stock and sports stories. And we're going to have to touch just a little bit, Pete, I think at the top of the show here, about the 818,000 jobs that were misstated. Now, Pete and I, folks, have been saying for a long time that, boy, they keep telling us this is the most rip-roaring economy ever. And we're saying most Americans aren't feeling it. And now we know why. When you misstate by over 750,000 jobs, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
It implies the economy is not in as good a shape, which explains why, by the way, Pete, more people are looking for jobs now at the biggest numbers in the last 15 years. Why would they be doing that? I wonder if they're really confident about how the economy's going.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. We always say that. Pete and I overuse that phrase. Well, it's interesting. But it is interesting. It might even be sort of implied that maybe somebody was trying to dummy up the numbers to make it seem like things were better. Maybe. All right. Let's dive right in, Pete. Jump off the conspiracy theory and right into macro minute, shall we? Macro minute, folks, I'm going to say is 30-year mortgage rates. Yeah, back down to 6.5%. They touched 8% not too long ago, but mortgage applications are still down 5%. Applications for refis are down 50%. So I'm going to look at that, Pete, and say more evidence that maybe, Pete, people aren't as confident as the press and the mainstream media wants to tell us.
I would say you're correct on all fronts. That all being said, John, my macro minute is this, and I'm not just being lazy about it because I said it Monday, said it Tuesday. I'm going to say it again today. The Fed committee, right? The Fed committee, the meeting, the minutes, Powell, all of that I think is going to be as market moving as anything. And it's just kind of an amazing time that we're in, John. And I still think many of those guys in the Fed and gals, they kind of want to get out there and get their opinion out there. They want somebody to write what they have to say about what they think, which could cause a little bit more and be a catalyst for the markets to kind of shift around a little bit. We'll see. But I think that's probably the most macro part of this whole thing going into this meeting at Jackson Hole.
Yeah, there's very little doubt, even with the numbers that we've shared with you folks about overstatement of jobs and so forth. There's very little doubt that the Fed is going to be less hawkish and more dovish, meaning that they're likely to be cutting rates September 18th. But I think it's going to be 1/4 of a point, Pete, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so fantastic futures. Well, volatility is something that you pay a lot of attention to, Pete. I do too. But volatility has still hung in there despite the fact that it's made that big correction from the 65 number that you cited right around the 5th of August.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this, John. I wanted to just go back because I wanted to look at the numbers. For the morons, and I do mean that, and they are on TV, that were out there talking about selling May and going away. Really? I mean, I've been on this many times before. I'm going to just say this really quick. So had you done that, you would have missed a 600-point rally in the S&P. If you sold at 5,000 beginning of May because you like this stupid thing called sell in May and go away, I mean, honestly, here we are today at 5,600 on the S&P. So I'm not so sure that that is the smartest thing in the world. And every time I hear it, every single May, I just look over, whether it's on TV or sitting on one of the seats looking at somebody who says it. I just think, wow, I would love to be in the trading pit against that person, whoever that person might be. That being said, John, with volatility, it has crept back up a little bit. We were in the 1440 area, then we got up towards 16. We're maybe even a little bit above 16 right now. I think all of that 16, that extra 1.5 to the upside, has to do with the Fed, because that will be market moving. That being said, I think we're going to not see not going to be spiking most likely towards 20. If anything else, we might even see a little bit of relief and come back once we get all the data from the Fed.
Agreed. And that data will be coming our way starting tomorrow, folks, the 22nd. So 22nd, 23rd, those are the 2 days of that meeting that really matter. And most of the information will be coming our way tomorrow, the 22nd. All right. Pete, I thought I'd show you this about the meme stocks, because the meme stocks are pretty interesting right here. Sometimes people use it as an opportunity to say, well, risk is back on, because look at the meme stocks. Yeah. You look at those like Rocket or Owl or Palantir, and you say, wow, that's made a pretty nice move. That's since August 5th, folks. So 34%, that's even more than we got out of NVIDIA. So that's a pretty outrageously, I think, Pete, at least that people are willing to put risk on. Yeah. And I thought we should point that out.
Yep, love seeing that. I love some of those names. You got Carvana up there. You got Robinhood up there. You got Siri. And by the way, we had options just the other day in that one, John. And then the same day they went from a nickel all the way up towards 20 cents today in one trading session, essentially. So there's some options being played out there in some of these various names in the meme world, for sure.
Indeed. Well, let's switch gears over to a group of stocks, Pete, that had specific news today. Target being one of those. Target, TGT. Pete, of course, friends with Brian Cornell, the CEO over there at Target. He has to be a lot happier this year, Pete, with the report than he was last year, because last year at this time, he was telling us about $700 million of theft or shrinkage, which is another way of saying people are walking out of the store with stuff. They're not doing that nearly as much, Pete, and surprise, surprise, without that 50 basis points of drag, that stock is doing much better and pushing double-digit gain today.
Yeah, had a really good spike early on, John. He got all the way up to 167. Now the 52-week low and high, you're looking at 102 all the way to 182. So 167, that was a nice move. Last I looked, it was somewhere closer to call it 161, still up significantly to the upside. This was a great quarter. I mean, you look at it from every perspective, because one of the things that you and I like to talk about is, well, what is it year over year? It's one thing to beat the estimates, right? But to see it also being up year over year, I think, is even more important. So we see that out of Target. We see it in the earnings. We see it in the revenue. Their comp sales were even up 2%. They raised the full year from 860 to 960 all the way up to 9 to 970. So they really raised up that bottom end. And then the digital sales up 8.7%. Traffic was up 3%. I couldn't find, and I've said this day after day after day in this earnings cycle, I can't find anything in this report, particularly after you talked about shrinkage there. There's nothing negative on this one. This one is a very, very solid report, and it shows you that the consumer is coming back to some of these various names. We knew it and we heard it from Walmart. Now we're hearing it from Target.
Yep. And, it's not a surprise, folks, that if you stop having people just run into your store with bags and fill them up and walk out without paying for anything, forgetting about the pay at the kiosk thing that they've also cut way back on. Now they have at least people out at those kiosks so that people don't just go, "Yep, well, that's it," and they walk out with stuff.
A lot of baker's dozens going out of there too, John.
Yep, a lot of 13 things instead of the 12s going out. All right, let's talk about JD, Pete, because Walmart, another stock that Pete just mentioned, they had a big stake in JD. And JD.com, well, they're ending this 8-year partnership, apparently. Walmart is going to sell 145 million shares, priced between about $24.85 and $25.85. Morgan Stanley is going to be doing that transaction, Pete, for them. And that'll bring them a lot of money, obviously. And they basically have said, you know what? We've made a nice score here. We're going to get out. But it pushed JD shares down pretty hard in the short term, with those falling by 11%. They've recovered to a loss of 5% at mid-session.
Yeah, makes some sense that they would get a little bit of a loss there, John. I mean, this was the largest shareholder, as you pointed out, 144 million shares. So this is pretty amazing how they've just decided, you know what, we're going to exit. It doesn't mean there's not still going to be some sort of relationship, because from what I understand, there is some sort of relationship, but they are closing up this number, and they're closing the entire number up. So it'll be more different sort of takeaways and giveaways back and forth with one another. I think this is a very, very impressive. I think it's great for Walmart. JD, on the other hand, they're probably sort of wondering right now what exactly happened. They probably actually know deep down what happened. Dealing with the Chinese is always going to be an interesting thing, John. I'll just say this, and it's not being offensive, but the reality is, they are not capitalists. Let's just remember that for a moment. This is a communist society. So I think that Walmart's probably making a very good decision after this 8-year partnership.
Yeah, and I think they're I wouldn't be surprised if they found a way to work together, Pete. But you make a nice investment like this, and then you have those questions, as Pete said, about, well, it is the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, that you're dealing with. You're dealing with an individual, but that individual is controlled by the CCP.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, let's talk now just a little bit about Keysight Technologies, KEYS. Communications, whether it's in automobiles, whether it's space, whatever, that's what KEYS does. Now, they had strong earnings. They came out with $1.57 versus $1.35. That's a nice beat. And they surpassed on the actual, that's a bottom line number, of course, but the top line number, or sales, the revenue number, also beating. And that's why this stock is getting a double-digit lift at mid-session.
Yeah, having a great lift, a lot of volume. We talked about all these. All these have very, very high volume involved in these stocks today. Not that that's a shock, but just so everybody's fully aware. Near the 52-week highs, not hitting through the 52-week highs or establishing 52-week highs, but nonetheless, a really nice jump to the upside, John. And you talked about it. I mean, those key elements of the past quarter, on top of that, the guidance going forward for the full year was very strong. So you really can't find too many holes in this one either. I mean, is it a gradual recovery? Probably. But nonetheless, this is something where they beat it in just about every metric that we would be looking at. And I think that's always a good thing. Year over year is the one thing where, like I pointed out, I like seeing the year over year, because it tells you something about where they were, where they're going. That's the only thing that kind of concerns me, a little bit of a decline there. And because of that, it doesn't mean it's necessarily negative, but it certainly is something where things have slowed down, and like they said, gradual. So we'll take their word for that. But nonetheless, a really, really nice quarter, and not that far off those 52-week highs.
Yeah, this one is one where Keysight, KEYS, making that strong double-digit move. Let's talk about another one with a strong double-digit move, Pete. TJX, almost a double-digit. In the pre-market, they looked even a little bit better, but falling off a little bit, now up 6.5%. TJ Maxx, full-year guidance, both pre-tax profit and earnings per share. The numbers here, very strong. And you know what? 52-week high, Pete. 52-week high over here at TJX. Now,
Yeah.
I could just say, for instance, that Macy's or a number of these other places where they carry multiple brands, because Macy's does, just like TJ's does. But we know TJ's is basically excess inventory, and that's why people go there to get that deal. Macy's not doing nearly as well, Pete, and that stock trading down hard today. But let's just focus on the good. TJ's doing a great job.
Yeah, TJ Maxx, like you said, a 52-week high today. It's been rocketing to the upside, hit over 120. Free cash flow there is extremely strong, $3.3 billion, John. When you beat on earnings, which they did, that's solid. When you beat on the sales, also solid. That was strong. I also even like one last thing that they did include when they were talking about things in the quarter and everything. $350 million they're going to put over there for a 35% ownership from a Middle East. It's a off-price retail company. That's something as well. They're just trying to expand a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think this is something very solid for TJX. It had been kind of suffering for a little while, John, because there just wasn't enough activity. They were not good when it came to traffic. All of that has turned around. It looks like TJ Maxx, obviously, TJX, looking very, very solid based upon all those numbers that they reported. Like I said, a lot of those out there during this earnings season that have absolutely crushed it. TJX, they are definitely in that category.
Absolutely. Looking good. And again, it seems that TJ, Pete, it doesn't really matter hardly what the environment is. If times are tough, people shop there more. If times are good, people shop there more. I mean, there is just a deal to be had, and many of us, whether it's a tough year or a great year, go there regardless. And I certainly do, Pete, because I love a deal.
Yeah.
All right. How about sports, Pete? What do you got for us today?
Well, I thought it would be fun, John, as we get very close to the NFL season kicking off. Obviously, college football is kicking off this Saturday, but which should be pretty exciting. But it's fun to see what teams are trying to do and how they're trying to manipulate their rosters as you get a little bit closer to those final cuts and obviously the start of the season. And I thought it would be fun to look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why is that? Well, because of the fact that it's Justin Fields, your old quarterback down in Chicago, who I still don't think they should have gotten rid of him, but nonetheless, he's gone. And I think that's going to be very interesting with Pittsburgh. You've also got Russell Wilson, right? They got Russell Wilson practically for free, John, because his contract is mostly still getting paid back in Denver. They had to pay what? $1 million, $3 million, whatever it was. It was a minuscule amount of what he was actually getting paid. So Denver's having to eat that still. But is Russell Wilson stepping up? Maybe. He's got the experience, but when you look at Justin Fields, you look at a guy who's 10 years younger. He's extremely athletic. He actually put together, I think, a very good year last year for a very young quarterback. And for whatever reason, the Bears decided to give up on him. I think he'll end up being the starter. And I saw our buddy, John, Mike Tannenbaum, was on one of the shows. He's a great guy. John and I have gotten to know him over the years, and he's really a guy who's been a GM. He's been this guy on TV for a really long time. He does an excellent job. He had something that I hadn't thought of, so I'm going to steal it from him because I really like it. But he had the idea of the Minnesota Vikings. Should they go out and get Russell Wilson? Because does Russell Wilson, does he need to be the starter at Pittsburgh, or could you just say, you know what, it's so close, Justin's athletic, we've already got Najee, we've got this great team in front of us, got running backs, receivers, like a great tight end, really good offensive line, they added to it in the draft. Do you stick with that and just have Justin there and maybe do some sort of a trade for a quarterback of some sort with the Minnesota Vikings? It sounded pretty interesting to me because I'm not so excited about the quarterback situation with the Vikings right now. The other day, John, I put together USC quarterbacks and what they've done when they've gotten to the NFL. You'd be shocked how bad they are. I mean, how awful they are. And it doesn't matter if they're the first pick, the third pick, the fifth pick. They just seem to dump. And I think it's because of all the talent around them. But that one, I think, is pretty interesting. And I liked what Tannenbaum had to say about that. So what do you think? I think the Steelers could be pretty damn good with Justin. And I think that the Vikings wouldn't be so bad to think about this trade maybe for Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings are paying – Justin Jefferson, Pete, a fortune.
Yep.
Deservedly so. Best receiver in all of football. Mm-hmm. you got to have if Darnold can't get him the ball enough, Pete, then you've got to make a move like the one that you and Tannenbaum described, because he is not going to be a happy camper. I mean, this is not a problem guy in the locker room, not by a long stretch. But if you can't get him the ball, he is not going to be happy. The fans won't be happy. The offensive line won't be happy. Darnold has to get him the ball. And if he's able to do that, things will work out fine. I'm not saying they're playoff bound, but things will work out fine for them. If they do not get Justin Jefferson the ball, then they've got to find somebody who can do it. Now, there's other places, Pete. In fact, I'm going to throw out, you've got Zach Wilson over there with the Broncos, with Stidham and Bo Nix. And I think one of those players, I think Bo Nix is going to start, Pete. I think that kid.
They named him the starter. Starter.
Well, he deserves it. He's in camp. He's been great. You and I said into the draft, he's great. We love Daniels, and we love that guy. And I'm hoping for Caleb Williams. He's had, a couple connections with Odunze that look pretty damn good, Pete. And other players. That's Caleb over there, and another USC quarterback. But we're hoping for better things from him than from some of these others like Sam Darnold. But I think you could go after a Zach Wilson, Pete, if you're the Vikes. You could go after Stidham. But Bo Nix starting, that's great. And that was a good fight between those three, because one of them, huge pedigree from, a high draft position, that's Zach Wilson. And meanwhile, Stidham played pretty damn well last year. So Bo Nix coming in and taking charge, I think that gives them room, Pete, to maybe move one of those other two guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that you and I both were on Bo Nix. We talked about Bo Nix. We didn't understand why he slid down as much as he did, because he was the most accurate quarterback last year. And he had all the other numbers that went along with it. I mean, it's and one of the fastest releases out there and the best completion percentage. I mean, the whole thing kind of didn't make sense that he slid to where he did, but he did. And that's just the way it goes. John, how about this next one? I know you're excited about this one. You're a Colorado guy. You've got a daughter there. And it's year 2 for Neon Deion, who doesn't seem like the same Deion Sanders that he was last year, when it was all fun and games and he had the beautiful white smile and all that stuff that he has out there and all of the hoopla. And they were 3-0, John. They were 3-0. This team is going all the way. And I'm like, look, they haven't played anybody. And everybody is putting them into this spot, and suddenly they're ranked and everything else. Well, they lost 8 of the next 9 games after that. So it's going to be a different year this year. It'll be a fresh year. Oh, by the way, they are now in the Big 12, no longer in the Pac-12. So that might change things up a little bit as well. I think this is a very interesting venture that they're going to take. And the problem that I see in front of them, John, is they could start off maybe okay. But even that, I'll tell you what, North Dakota State is their first game. And that's the next step, but still Division I. But they play pretty quality football at North Dakota State. I mean, that is an amazing franchise, we could call it, in football. Then they get Nebraska, who I think is a better team than they were. Then they get Colorado State, who gave them a heck of a game last year as well. What I'm concerned about for them is when you look at the back half of the schedule, they've got Central Florida, who's a really good football team in Orlando. Come back, they got to play number 18 K-State. Then they go to Arizona, number 21. Then they later on at the last 3 games, they've got number 12 Utah. That's going to be tough. At number 22 Kansas, that's going to be tough. At home against number 17 Oklahoma State. I'm wearing the hat right now, as a matter of fact. That was one of my calls yesterday, John, where I said with Mark, I said, look, who are going to be the sleepers that maybe get into this college football playoff? I would put Oklahoma State in that group. Oklahoma State's got the best running back in football this year. They've got a heck of a quarterback. He throws too many interceptions. He won't throw as many this year, I think, just because of maturity and understanding and everything else. But what do you think about Colorado? Because the way I'm looking at it, John, I don't know if they win more than 3 games this year. But you might have a different opinion on that one, but the Big 12 is not just a cakewalk. It is not a cakewalk, and their preseason is not really a cakewalk either.
No, and Dion took real offense, Pete, at that CBS reporter that ranked the top coaches in his conference, and Dion wasn't anywhere near the top. He was at the bottom. I will say that I love this guy. I realized the mistakes he made because I was there for some of them last year, Pete, where he could have against, I think it was Oregon State, Pete, and a couple others, he could have, with the right decision, either made that game close to the very end or even won the game. But he made bad decisions, coaching decisions. Coaches coach, players play, but if you're sending in, the offense or the defense at certain times, or if you're making a call, Pete, on a penalty, do you take points off the board? Very few coaches are willing to do that. Some will. In other words, would you take a field goal off the board for a chance to go for the end zone? But the bad decisions, I think, that he made last year, people stood up and took notice, and there were a few. So now I probably won't get to go in the press box with Dion for saying that. But on the other hand, the players do play. And if he has an O-line that can give Shedeur the time that he needs this year, Pete, they'll win more than 3 games.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, the offensive line gets banged up and Shedeur's got to run for his life like a jailbreak every single play, like he did most of the second half of the season last year, it's going to be a long one for Dion and Colorado. Yeah. But I'll be confident and say that I think he picked up enough players to fill in there, and hopefully they don't all have to be 35-yard passes, Pete. If they picked up a few more tips from you about throwing to the tight end, I think that'd be a better squad this year.
Yeah, it's interesting also, John, even in the portal, how they aren't the same team that they were last year with all the pomp and circumstance and everything else. This year, it's Ole Miss, and they've been crushing it. And then multiple other SEC teams that have done a great job in the portal. And yesterday, Mark and I were even talking about Clemson and the head coach down there who does not use the portal. He doesn't like it. His version, he said, is the freshman portal, which is going to high schools and offering them scholarships and bringing them to Clemson. But as long as he wins, that'll be okay. But if he wanes at all, that's going to be something that I think might get him fired at some point in time. I hope not, because I actually, in some ways, kind of like the fact that the portal's a little bit over. They don't have any regulations on the portal. They don't have any regulations on NIL. You've got some guys. We got a kid the other day who was getting $9.2 million, John. It was his offer. He's a sophomore in high school. $9.2 million. So when he signs, he gets $2 million. Then he gets 1.6 for the rest of it. But, that's college sports today. It's a much different game. But I'm not sure that I like it from that perspective as much as I used to. I think if you want to be able to transfer, you should be able to transfer. But I don't know that you should transfer every single year and get money every single year from a different NIL. I mean, somehow that just doesn't add up to me to be amateur athletics.
Yeah, well, it ain't amateur athletics. You're absolutely right. And the part about you getting that paycheck, although I did notice, Pete, that a lot of the kids at Texas are getting Lamborghinis from Lamborghini of Austin or whatever. So rather than getting money, they're getting a car. And I don't think they own the car, but, does the kid really care if he owns the car? If it's $160,000 or $200,000 vehicle? As long as they're driving it, it's the same thing, same net. All right. Thanks for joining us, folks. I hope you check out marketrebellion.com/mastermind. That's marketrebellion.com/mastermind. There you see it. Thank you, Jared. If you take your phone out and scan that QR code there, folks, you could join us in Aventura, Florida at the Hilton on the 11th of October, because we'll be there live trading, showing you what we're doing, why we're doing it, and you could really move up your trading game and be ready for 25, 26, 27, 28, no matter who the president is. All right. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon, folks. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time.